By the late 20th century, the theory of religious origins we now know as astrotheology seemed all but extinct. But then, unexpectedly, it found new support. This was not the result of any new evidence. If anything, the case was even weaker. Instead, it was the result of a new social phenomenon: popular conspiracy theories. While books promoting quack conspiracy theories have been around since the dawn of publishing, this new breed of crackpot adopted the posture of investigative journalists uncovering the truth kept hidden from the masses. The pattern was set by Mark Lane's rush to judgment on the Kennedy assassination. Within a decade, the bestseller list teemed with books parading revelations on ancient astronauts, lost continents, the Bermuda Triangle, and the coming Ice Age. Christians were certainly not exempt from this trend, and they contributed a stream of end-of-the-world titles. In this new media age, sensationalism trumped scholarship every time. Soon, conspiracy theories about Jesus appeared. One had Michael Bejon, Richard Lee, and Henry Lincoln offering a messianic legacy thesis in Holy Blood, Holy Grail that centered on the discovery of a mysterious group called the Priory of Sion. It turns out the authors fell for a ruse engineered by a con artist named Pierre Plantard, who invented the group, planted the evidence, and conveniently wrote himself in as their current leader. Decades later, Dan Brown fell for the same scheme, and he made it the basis of his novel The Da Vinci Code. In this atmosphere, astrotheology was not that much of a stretch, but the older titles were not flashy enough for the new era of conspiracy theories that employed sensationalism, slick packaging, and a solid marketing strategy. Astrotheology needed a popular new face. The first candidate was one Russell Pine, who went under the name Jordan Maxwell. A favorite of those who searched for esoteric revelations within the design of the U.S. $1 bill, Maxwell took conspiracy theory to the level of performance art as he wove tales of sun gods, volcanoes, drugs, and sex into his make-it-up-as-you-go theory of religion. Instrumental in getting astrotheology noticed again, Maxwell was revered in the conspiracy theorist subculture, managed to wed astrotheology to that subculture, and grew in popularity as it made headway into American popular culture. Maxwell was best known for his etymological derivations that supposedly revealed the hidden truths behind whatever conspiracy he was rambling on about at the moment. Most of these were quite laughable and dependent upon modern English, and hence had no connection to anything in the ancient world. For example, let us now listen to Jordan Maxwell explain the connections between the name Abram, the original name for Abraham, and the zodiac.
Abraham's first name was actually Abram, A-B-R-A-M, because in the ancient Hebrew, A-B, Ab, is father. And Ram, R-A-M, is Aries, the ram. The constellation of the ram is Aries, the ram.
The problem with the preceding derivation should be quite obvious. The word ram is in fact modern English, and hence could have absolutely no connection to the meaning of a word written in Hebrew thousands of years ago. Maxwell's constant barrage of similar linguistic tidbits, a few of which made their way into the original version of Zeitgeist, makes taking him seriously rather difficult. Given his general quirkiness, he never moved much beyond the conspiracy theorist subculture, but he was a major influence upon those who did. Another influence for some Zeitgeist supporters is Barbara G. Walker, whose books on religion, such as the Women's Encyclopedia of Myths and Secrets, have earned her an avid following among less than scholarly feminists and some conspiracy theorists. Walker begins with the long discredited thesis of an ancient worldwide matriarchal culture as her starting point, and then misrepresents evidence in the writings of others to fill in the gaps. Substituting passion for evidence, she writes from the perspective that some vast conspiracy has suppressed the knowledge of the ancient matriarchy and forces her conclusions by treating the historical record as her own personal Rorschach blot. An example of her methodology appears in the very first entry of the aforementioned encyclopedia. In discussing the letter A, she ends up producing a feminist version of the silliness generated by Alvin Boyd Kuhn on the same subject discussed in a previous video. For Walker's version, she uses a translation of cuneiform tablets made a century ago and explains that the Babylonians called the Great Mother A, the beginning, or Aya, the mother of all things. However, when one checks her cited source, the goddess in question is only mentioned incidentally as the beloved of the sun god Shamash. The A being used was not in fact a letter at all, but merely an attempt to phonetically render the goddess's name, which today is usually rendered Aya. Moreover, since this was not discussing a letter, and cuneiform is not related to our alphabet, the assumption that the same sound is the first letter in an ordered cuneiform alphabet and hence may be connected to the phrase the beginning, as the Greek alpha is, as the first letter of the Greek alphabet, is pure insanity. As for the rest of this so-called encyclopedia, let's just say the quality of the entries does not get appreciably better. Another influence is the duo of Timothy Frake and Peter Gandy. Although not supporters of the astrotheological theory as presented in Zeitgeist, theirs is more of a New Age Jesus mythicist theory. There is enough overlap that they tend to appeal to much of the same audience. Their first two books were on Hermetism and pagan philosophers, and they quote mined sources in each to force them into conformity with the pair's own New Age views. This was followed by their turning to Christianity in what is by far their most successful book, titled The Jesus Mysteries. This book was made to order for reviving discredited ideas and placing them front and center in the new world of popular pseudo-scholarship. It had breezy prose, sensationalistic claims, a catchy title, and an attention-grabbing cover. In fact, it is the cover photo, displaying an amulet supposedly depicting the god Dionysus crucified, that is probably the thing most remembered from the book. It has since appeared in Zeitgeist and related efforts. All of this despite the fact that this alleged artifact has been recognized as a modern fake for over half a century. Later efforts on Christianity continued to mine the same subject without as much commercial success. No academics in the related fields takes their work seriously, and New Testament scholar N.T. Wright, when asked to appear with the pair to discuss the Jesus Mysteries, replied it would be like asking an astronomer to appear with someone who just wrote a book claiming the moon is made of green cheese. As with many such authors, their work is full of selective citations that distort the author's actual intent. For example, in attempting to demonstrate serious consideration for the Jesus mythicist idea, they cite New Testament scholar Robert Van Voorst, mentioning the existence of many books asserting Jesus did not exist. Left out of this citation is that Van Voorst follows this by noting New Testament scholars typically view these arguments as so weak or bizarre that they are relegated to footnotes or completely ignored. He then goes on to say that their arguments have failed to convince scholars of many disciplines and religious creeds, and concludes the discussion by stating that biblical scholars and classical historians now regard Jesus mythicism as effectively refuted. Frake and Gandy also act on another impulse common in such material. they classify the beliefs of ancient groups of various stripes to be precursors to their own views. Thus, belief systems from Hermetism to Mithraism to Platonism to, in particular, Gnosticism are jumbled together and forced into their own New Age matrix. It's a bit difficult to take these two self-proclaimed evangelists for Gnosticism seriously when they cannot properly define what it is they supposedly endorse. Another influence is Tom Harper, a former Anglican priest and New Testament professor turned religion columnist and avid New Ager. In The Pagan Christ, he covered much of the same ground as Frake and Gandhi. Hopes that Harper might produce a more substantial effort, given his prior tenure in academia, were quickly dashed when he made clear his research was dependent upon the writings of Godfrey Higgins, Gerald Massey, and Alvin Boyd Kuhn, an admission that made much of the book instantly disposable. Although he seemed a bit upset that his book has been viewed by serious scholars as pseudo-scholarship at best and sheer quackery at worst, it is nonetheless the case that while Harper may find Higgins, Massey, and Kuhn profound, the scholarly community is of another opinion, and their views have more credence than the New Age converts pay on to his esoteric heroes. While the work of Jordan Maxwell might have gotten the Zeitgeist ball rolling, it is D.M. Murdoch who is now its greatest defender and the reigning expert among supporters of astrotheology. While not taken seriously among academics in the field of religion, she does get points for her dogged perseverance in exposing the vast Christian conspiracy. She emerged in the late 1990s under the name Acharya S. and first gained notice for her website featuring her theories on religion and other material that easily identified her as integrated into the conspiracy theorist subculture. For example, in addition to her writings on religion, her website featured material common to conspiracy theorists at the time, such as the claim that AIDS was not related to the HIV virus. Her take in an article she wrote for her website was that AIDS was a non-existent disease created to suppress the liberating effects of the sexual revolution and make the masses easier to control. She also had some interesting choices among her list of favorite websites, including a link to an online version of Henry Ford's The International Jew, which she referred to as an extraordinary work, a website outlining something called the Rothschilds' occupational government, and one claiming the Jews invented organized crime. In her capacity as the associate director of something called the Institute for Historical Accuracy, she wrote a letter to the History Channel responding to a documentary on the so-called Protocols of the Elders of Zion, in which she left their authorship an open question, but then on the subject of anti-Semitism added that, quote, Jewish authorities will admit that the term is used in order to quash any criticism of Judaism as a bigoted, sexist, and divisive ideology, which it is clearly demonstrated to be in the Old Testament, the Jewish Apocrypha, the Dead Sea Scrolls, and the Talmud. End quote. Now, I do not believe her target was as much the Jewish people, but rather the Judeo-Christian tradition's influence in Western cultures. But needless to say, such material was expunged from later versions of her website as she sought to upgrade her image. Murdoch's crackpot credentials are further enhanced by noting the aforementioned Institute for Historical Accuracy, of which she was associate director, was far from being serious, instead an offshoot of an organization dedicated to research in cryptozoology, things such as Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster. Further evidence was given when her first book, titled The Christ Conspiracy, was published by David Hatcher Childress of Ancient Aliens fame and his Adventures Unlimited Press, while the foreword of the book was written by conspiracy theorist periodical Steam Shovel Press's publisher, Ken Thomas. As for the book itself, It is a safe bet that any crackpot anti-Christian author of your choosing will be cited somewhere in its pages, as she left no stone unturned, and her sources included those that were not only dubious but deranged. Perhaps the best illustration of the general insanity of the book's tenor is given when she declared that Christianity was run by a Freemasonic cabal led by the Grand Master of all Freemasons, the Pope. It was moments like that which made the book a classic of conspiracy theorist excess. Her next effort, Sons of God, extended her dubious assertions from one religion to three by adding Hinduism and Buddhism to the mix. Research quality was little better than her first effort. She relied primarily upon dubious and outdated sources and provided little in the way of substantial evidence for her claims. At this point, she toned down the outright craziness considerably, began writing under the name D.M. Murdoch, and produced 2 books, Who Was Jesus and Christ in Egypt, where she touted her use of current reputable scholars in New Testament studies and Egyptology. What was not mentioned was her frequent misrepresentation of their views, as she cited them to support ideas they would never have considered a viable option. She is currently planning a second edition of the Christ Conspiracy that will likely replace the no-holds-barred zaniness of that early book with her current pattern of questionable citations. She still has not gained real credence as a scholarly author, but now her errors are just boring quote mines rather than the flame-throwing insanity she formerly held in common with Jordan Maxwell. Anyone who has interacted with her supporters will find them a rather odd lot whose deference to her borders on a cult of personality and matches similar defenses of other purveyors of pseudo-history such as Zechariah Sitchin, Eric von Donigan, Graham Hancock, and of course Jordan Maxwell. Frequently parroting quotes from her books verbatim on internet forums, they are unfazed by the scholarly rejection of her views, treat any criticism of her as a personal affront, and question her critics' motivations rather than address their evidence. Judging by their oversensitive reactions, it seems everyone in the world has an axe to grind except Ms. Murdoch. Thus, even if Murdoch no longer wishes to be thought of as a conspiracy theorist, the behavior of her fanboys reminds everyone of her core base of support. Although Jordan Maxwell was the inspiration behind Zeitgeist, and D.M. Murdoch is the expert called upon by its fans, it is Peter Joseph who produced the film that brought these ideas to a mass audience. More recently, Joseph has given less attention to the conspiracy theories of the Zeitgeist film and became a backer of the socio-economic ideas of Jacques Fresco's Venus Project, which was the basis of his later films Zeitgeist Addendum and Zeitgeist Moving Forward. And he also founded the Zeitgeist movement to promote these ideas. Joseph may have done more to bring astrotheology to a popular mass audience than anyone, but the subsequent criticism of the film exposed his basic ignorance of the history of religion, and he has left the matter primarily to Murdoch. It is unclear if he will expend much effort on the subject in the future, as his interests seem to be elsewhere, at least for the moment. Other supporters of astrotheology either parrot much of the recent work of Murdoch or are full-blown conspiracy theorists of the Jordan Maxwell school. In future videos in the series, we will be analyzing the particular claims of astrotheology and mainly pulling the material from that associated with the film and Murdoch's work. Some of the other work is discussed in the book, but we're going to be restricting ourselves in the series to specifically things claimed in the Zeitgeist film.